seconds. Now, viewers, politics is often described as the study of power, governance, and decision-making within a society. Now, at its core, politics really examines how power is distributed, contested, and used to influence or control the behavior of people and institutions. Now, the Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley recently made an announcement to resign from office before the end of his legal tenure. This announcement opened the door for extensive commentary, not only on who might step into the role of Prime Minister, but also the processes and procedures involved to get there. Now, joining me this morning on Good Morning Tobago is former Minority Leader, Mr. Ashworth Jack. Mr. Jack, good morning. And how are you doing?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I am fine, thank you. And I must say it's a pleasure to finally have met you.
Yes.
We had a conversation on the phone a couple of months ago. And of course, as I came in, I had to comment that is the first time I've ever been interviewed on Tobago Update by a male figure. And then you actually told me who you were.
Yes.
It was interesting.
Now, Mr. Jack, this morning's conversation is going to be focused on politics. And I remember as a young boy growing up in Mount St. George, my grandfather and you, I will always overhear conversations between you all. Sometimes if you're stopping each other on the side of the road, I'm in the back seat listening. So give us some insight into your history of politics.
Well, it's interesting, that when I found out when you called me initially for some information, and I found out you were Jason's grandson. Because my history of politics I think has been widely known. I'll go back for as far back as 11 years old. I knew Jason at 11 because myself, a gentleman by the name of Jerry Alley, we were kind of Jason's understudy in learning to set up equipment for the then DAC. And Jason was always very protective of us as, I must say, as children, So the meetings that were too far from home, we weren't allowed to go to help to set up. And he made sure, though, that once we were out, that we got home and we got home safely. And if you know your grandfather very well, he was as kind as his temper was short.
Yes.
Yeah, so he was, and once you got around, he would be very, very, very protective, and so people like Jason are the reason that I have done a lot of things that I've done. Sometimes at home when things go wrong, you're just able to do almost anything. I say, but we can't do. And it's because of the myriad of experiences that you have had in a number of areas. And I think that's one of the things that is missing in today's world, where elders take younger people under their arms and help them out, show them the ways of the world and stuff like that. People more advantage people now than help them.
Correct.
And I think that I long for the day. And I was seeing the news about young people getting into crime at as early as 11, 12. I mean, I had a big brother. My biggest brother was a police officer. His name was Talbot. He died a couple of years ago. And I told people probably my whole life, I never lime on the block. Because if my biggest brother passed and see you on the block, there was consequences to pay. So the issue of the African proverb of taking a village to grow a child was real. But in our generation, we are the ones that spoil that. We are the ones that start saying, don't hit my child, don't talk to my child, yours, mine, my child. But we grew up in a time where everybody in the village was responsible in some way for every child in the village. And I always tell people 2 pairs of eyes or 4 pairs of eyes is okay. But when you have 100 pairs of eyes, it's a totally different thing altogether. And we didn't have phones. But if you did something, by the time you got home, your parents already knew. And you want to know how did I running coming home? But yet the message got home before I got, and then, so there was respect because you knew what but there was also a tinge of fear because you knew the consequence of those kind of actions. But similarly, for persons who were well disciplined, there was a kind of respect that came from the elders in the village. You could have gone into the yard and climbed the fruit trees and that kind of stuff. With the loss of a lot of that, you find that, and of course, with the over commercialization of everything, and with the advent of social media, where people are seeing all the bling, as they call it, every little person have a chain that is of 5 and 6 and stuff, and people who never work a day think that they're entitled to the same thing that people who have worked for 30 and 40 years.
Understood.
And parents not having that kind of time, I guess, at home, because everybody hustling, and then the extended family is no longer there, where you grow up in a yard with your grandmother, your aunt, but even if they're there, is it okay for them to correct
the child?
The child. So all those things have added to where we are, and I think that it is sad, but it's not, all is not lost, and there need to be not more than the police, because the police should really be the last resort. Last resort.
And Mr. Jack, first of all, I want to thank you for just bringing back memories of my grandfather. He was someone who was always passionate about bridging that gap between the youth and the elders. He always believed that when you have that transfer of knowledge, it really adds towards building a better village and by extent a better island and country. And it's true. The youth now, they are getting involved in crime, maybe because it's glamorized, maybe because it seems as the easy way out. And Trinidad and Tobago, or crime rate, the issue of crime has been one that is a very heavy topic. It's something we're seeing every day. Just this morning, we are seeing unconfirmed reports of an attorney and her husband. They were recently murdered in Trinidad. And Mr. Jack, I want to get your perspective on the state of emergency. At the surface level, it seems as though as long as you're a law-abiding citizen, you shouldn't be affected. But it really comes down to question the effectiveness of the state of emergency. Do you think it's effective in any way?
Well, a number of things. To say that as long as you're a law-abiding citizen, you wouldn't be affected, it's a kind of play flippant disregard to what a state of emergency really is.
Okay.
A state of emergency is a suspension of your constitutional right. And we are talking about the issue of crime and stuff. And my question would be, is a state of emergency the only way to be able to deal with crime? It might be an effective way in a short term, in that you have the power of arrest, you have the power that is easily carried out. You have the issue of holding people more than the 48 hours.
Correct.
You have a situation where you don't need a search warrant to search your person or to search your premises or your vehicle and stuff like that. But what about people who may wish to abuse that? Because you can well have a situation where, and we know that in our society, people just don't like people for all kind of reasons.
Correct.
And therefore, there are people who can and will abuse that. And what we have to hope is that that is minimum. The minimum a number of persons who are doing that. I heard in the news item is saying that there were a number of firearms recovered. And I'm happy to hear that, I'm happy to hear that. But the question is that the only way you could have recovered the firearm? Because if you have enough information, then you could have gotten the warrant and you could have executed the warrant. My concern will continue to be the fact that every citizen of this country is working without any constitutional right. You really don't have a constitutional right, and I am concerned about that.
And it's right to be concerned, Mr. Jack, because we live in a society, we've seen it already in 2011, I think, when it was under Ms. Prasad-Bissessa's ruling. And that abuse of power would, of course, the state so much money, because we have people now, they will want to sue because, like you said, there are some people who will use that power to abuse the whole intention of the state of emergency. And you also touch on a really important point, which is the intention behind using this SOE, because state of emergency is supposed to be something that is last resort, and now we are just seeing it. It was announced. We're now seeing a state of emergency. People panicked, but they are trying to give us the reassurance. Okay, as long as you're not involved in crime, you shouldn't be worried. But like you rightfully mentioned, there are people who will abuse this state of emergency. Mr. Jack, and you
No,
also...
but before you go on to another topic, I was just going to say this. The issue of state of emergency sometimes is even abused by the people who put it in place.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you're old enough to know this, but some years ago, a government declared a limited state of emergency around a former speaker of the House premises in order to stop her from going to the House. In order for her to elect, to declare her seat vacant and elect a new speaker because she wasn't doing what they wanted. I think that was Okasi Paul.
Okay.
They wasn't doing what they wanted to do. So they declared a state of emergency in the vicinity of her home and a curfew. So they couldn't leave. So we have to be very careful. You know, sometimes if we don't know the history of things, we tend to underplay it. But when you know the history, you know the danger that is associated with it, you know you're very cautious in these matters.
Understood. And Mr. Jack, you would have noted that you observe firearms are being retrieved. We also saw some narcotics being retrieved, but that's operating on the backdrop of everyone knows that Trinidad and Tobago has a very porous border control. So it comes like, okay, you're getting rid of the guns, you're getting rid of the armed drugs, but at the same time, more is coming in. Do you think that the state of emergency that's focused on to target these firearms and drugs while also having a very, very poor border control, do you think that it is warranted or it makes sense? Because it's just like I would have articulated with Mr. Martin George when I did an interview with him, it's very equivalent to trying to catch water with a strainer.
You know, I like the analogy. Yeah, and that's one thing about the Tobago vernacular. It's so rich.
It's rich, yes.
But let me just say this. I heard the issue of the state of emergency to deal with, but it just for me is putting a plaster on a sore. Because the state of emergency will come to an end. The borders will remain unprotected. Do you think that the criminals are living underground, so they not hear what's going on, and the criminals sometimes are in association or collusion with even persons who know the law better than us?
Okay.
And they just have to wait if they think that the state of emergency is the worst time to move your drugs, to move your arms and ammunition. They just lie low for a while, and then as the state of emergency finishes, because there is no border control, there's no there's all the things that applied before the state of emergency continue to operate post this state of emergency. So if your business is going to be affected that badly, you just have to wait. Just wait it out, because there are going to be questions. Is this effective? Is this efficient? Are we doing this is making sense, and stuff like that. And then, of course, you know, they have to go back to the parliament for an extension and stuff like that after 15 days, I think it is.
Yes.
Then you have to go to the parliament for an extension. Of course, you have the majority, or I think so, based on what's going on.
We'll get into that very soon.
So you will get an extension of your 30 days. But how long? How many extensions can you get? And then after that, what happens? Is it that, for me, I am not a law enforcement person, but common sense told me a couple of things. I was told, as part of the nation was told, that they knew who they were targeting.
Okay.
And that there was a state of emergency, and then they're going to put the measures in place. And I'm saying that if that was the case, and you knew exactly who you're targeting, once, a couple of things could happen. One, you could have gotten search warrants for those people. Two, let's say that you want to move quickly because you don't trust the system, that somebody will tell them that a search warrant is coming. When the state of emergency was being put in place, I would have thought that prior to that, you would have those persons you trust, the police officers and stuff, the senior persons, do all the planning. So the minute the state of emergency was declared, you could have moved immediately to search and do what you have to do. But if you wait until you declare this state of emergency, and then you announce, well, we know who we're going to search. Don't you think those same people know that they've been targeted?
Yes.
You know? So I was a little taken aback that that is the approach that was taken, so
So, Mr. Jack,
it's
with
crazy.
all that you said, are you of the opinion that the state of emergency was just mere theatrics to create the image or the optics that
That you're doing something?
that the government is hard
Yeah,
on
yeah, I
crime?
think so. I mean, listen, last year we had two very unfortunate situations. I call them on both islands. Tobago had its highest murder rate ever, and Trinidad had its highest murder rate ever.
Correct.
That says something. And I am not going to say that if the government can solve the problem of crime, that the government is part of the problem. I wouldn't say that. I leave that for the Prime Minister to say, at least when he was in opposition. But now we have the highest murder rate ever. And I'm saying, but what do the police to do? What do you want us to do? And I'm saying, if you don't intend to move to solve crime, then you don't have no need for a police service. I have no need for our government, have Minister of National Security and all that. I've looked at Jamaica is a case in point. I don't know if you have been looking at what have happened in Jamaica in 2024. The Prime Minister, in terms of the crime rate, the Prime Minister would have, and the government have implemented some changes in terms of how they approach crime detection and crime prevention. And Jamaica last year had a 20% reduction in murders and serious crimes, right? And that speaks to people who is moving. If I know this was the topic, I'd have pulled someone else out. There are some islands in the Caribbean that went from very small murder rate to zero. I think about 3 or 4 of them. Some of them somewhere on the phone. So I'm saying it is not impossible. And of course, there are a couple who, like Barbados, had an increase in murder rates last year, stuff like that.
Yes.
But it is not impossible. Guyana had a reduction. St. Kitts Nevis had a reduction. I think Dominica, a couple of them have gone to zero. And so it is not impossible, but it calls for proper planning, it calls for proper mobilization, and it calls for adequate resources. And for me, it also calls for the kind of public interaction. Because that being said, parents, we have a responsibility also. Parents have to stop thinking that nobody could correct the children. I mean, I know teachers who are afraid to correct children in school.
Yes.
And so it can't all be left to the government and to the Tobago Police Service. It must be a holistic approach by the entire community, because the entire community is being affected by it.
Okay, Mr. Jack. So in terms of the state of emergency and crime reduction, we've identified all the problems. So I have to ask you, in your opinion, what do you think could be the possible solution?
As I said, this call for more than just a layman stuff, but it has a lot to do with how are all those social agents or the agents of socialization in our society being used. The churches is the churches just about tithes? Is the churches just about sowing a seed? What is how are they being used to spread the issue of non-violence? The community groups like the village council. Do we still have a situation where village councils think that the only use they have is to lock up the community center? Or is it that the community center, there's an encouragement for groups to use the community center and other community facilities as places to educate young people or to train young people? I am seeing a number of training programs being put on by the THA, and of course I also see some others, and that's another story. I don't agree, but that's another story. But the THA, and they're putting on a number of training programs. Are parents encouraging their children to avail themselves of those training opportunities? And now, when you have those people in a captive audience, are other things being used to explain to them the effect of of crime, not only on the family that suffers it, but also on your family that now have to find money that they don't have for legal fees and stuff like that. Are parents really conscious that you don't really know your children as well as you think you know them? But I also say, I heard a parent say something the other day, is that you make a child, you don't make their mind. I think that's an excuse for that, for lack of training. Right? They're going to be deviants. They have always been deviants. But there are some children that suffers from neglect.
Right.
And that neglect is what pushes them to other places where we see now gang becoming the parents of some of these children. And of course, they have been recruited for all kinds of things. And if we look at the history of child soldiers, because that's what they'll become. They are soldiers for this gang. If we look at the history of child soldiers, it never goes well, because people think children are all that innocent, but the psychology says that they are impressionable, so that it's easier to get them to do things that a bigger person might be more afraid to do. So we have to as a society, they have to be a lot more caring, a lot more reaching out. Especially to our young people and to our parents who might be not as fortunate and stuff like that. So I think that that needs to be part of it. We can't just think about the bling and stuff like that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jack, for that articulation. It was very, very thought-provoking. So we're going to take a quick break right now. And when we come back from the break, Mr. Jack, we'll be chatting a bit about the leadership in transition happening where the Prime Minister title is concerned. So viewers, just stick with us. Remember to share the live, and we'll be right back.